Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This week is show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Family Law Season 2 finale. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's pick up with Frank and Abby's divorce. Let's that be the kind of the starting off point for this discussion, where I love their back and forth in the courtroom. I even love that Joanne, which I kept going back and forth for so long. Is it Joanna? I always just kept shorting it, Jojo. But Joanne is there kind of for, no, she's in support for a different case. Never mind. I was about to say that she's there for the Lucy situation, which we'll talk about later. But either way, it is that situation. It's like this back and forth that Abby and Frank, neither one can really control themselves in the courtroom. Specifically, it was Abby at first who was kind of like with the outbursts and stuff, because it is this back and forth. Like, obviously, Frank is the one that keeps putting up more and more like restrictions and issues. His lawyer, played by Erica Sarah, doesn't seem like she 100% vibe with everything. It's just like, right, you don't have to agree with your client. You just have to go with what they do. You've got to give them the best advice you can. And it's like, right, if this is what my client wants, I have to present the best defense to allow my client to get the results that they want. So, but you can tell in moments where it's like she doesn't completely agree with it. It's just, once again, she's a lawyer doing her job, which I think it's like a doctor being the worst type of patient. It's like one doctor being visited by another doctor, which I actually kind of know that firsthand a little bit. Not really, but somewhat to an extent, because my mom's a registered nurse. So I'm like, it feels like, because sometimes I've noticed that where I'm like, oh, you feel like you're kind of an annoying patient because you're a doctor. You know, I think that medical stuff, like, it's almost like a therapist getting therapy, and it's almost like if they don't remove themselves from it, they make the worst patient. And I'm sure a lawyer being represented by another lawyer, it's like, oh, you make the worst client because of that. But regardless, that's how I felt in that regard. I kind of felt bad for Cordelia and Erica Sarah's characters in that regard, where the judge was like, yo, we're not going to like keep him having outbursts from either one of your clients. And like, can you calm them down? They both had to turn to their clients and be like, yo, chill. So, because it is this situation of, we'll talk about it more later, but Abby gets some offers that basically, and I figured this would be eventually where the story goes. I might even hinted that this might have been where season one, at the time I might have said that this was where season one was going to go, but I knew at some point her old job was going to offer her job back. So now it's because of that, she's in a position where she can make more money, because Frank is like, oh, I'll make it so that there's still spousal support because I make more money than her. But it's like, right, getting her old job back means that she would make about the same or even more than him. So, and it's a spousal support thing of like, let's kind of remove it from the table, but Frank didn't want to. Because I think still on some level, Frank wants it to be in a situation like, I don't remember if he was saying like he wanted that still being on the table or off the table. I thought he wanted it still on the table, whatever the case may be. But Frank tried to make it seem like, hey, she worked a lot of hours when she at her previous job, so that would cut into her ability to. So once again, Frank is still trying to paint her as an unfit mother, which is a narrative he's been running with for a while now. And that was also something they brought up in the court of like, yes, he's been kind of doing so many punitive things against Abby, trying to paint her in a negative light, which even the judge calls out in like, yeah, it is kind of messed up that, yes, she's had her struggles. Even she was like, and they made it clear, neither one of you coming out of this squeaky clean. Both of you look terrible, but at least all of Abby's issues have been in public. That's why she was like, all right, he want to go to court, I can go swinging. I'm on my dirt, like literally on a viral video all over. Like, I'm not going to be able to escape that. But Frank has been able to hide with like all his dirt. Only like lawyers and stuff know about it. But now like it's on open documents. It's out there for everyone to know. Like it's part of the trial now. It's out there in the public of, yes, he is all his duplicitous stuff. So I was actually surprised by the ruling that basically the judge is like, right, she thinks it was blasphemous for Frank to try and put it as like, Abby will be an unfit parent because of like a better paying job and more work hours. It's like, she's like, the judge is like, I'm not going to let that fly. So it is going back to a 50-50 split. Yes, you were in the right beforehand because Abby was a mess back then, but and I've seen the board like who said like, yes, she proved herself, her sobriety, that her being overwatched by Harry is done. So it's like she's proven herself. She's standing on her 2 feet, and I am so proud of her for what it's impressive what she's been able to do on her path to recovery. So you guys are 50-50 parent split now, but the stipulation is to keep the home situation, where it is, because this was something that specifically it's been an issue, but Sophia's the one that voiced the issue the most, was going back and forth between Frank's place and JoJo's place. And now it's like, cool, the kids get to stay at home, the parents rotate week out and week out. And I'm like, I never knew that was a thing. And I was like, that's interesting and weird and complicated, especially when you're going to a divorce, when you are splitting like this. Cause it's like, oh, like if you have someone, you can't have that. That'd be awkward. Cause it's like, well, Frank hasn't started dating yet, but Abby already has. And it's got to be that awkward thing of like, can't really bring them around the house. Cause that's weird. But I mean, eventually that might be a thing, but that's such an awkward thing of like, yeah, you got to share that space week in and week off. That's just so interesting. They were both going to fight it a little bit, but the judge was like, no, you're not going to change my mind. This is what it is. Accept it, which the kids are fine with it, but it's still there. That's the thing of like, once again, this show has been very like anti-Frank. I've been very anti-Frank. Even Harry's like, yeah, I used to like Frank. And even Abby's like, yeah, I used to too. But there is this moment where it's like, at the end of the day, it's so interesting because it parallels the Lucy situation very interestingly enough of like, right, retaliating because of hurt feelings. And that is what Frank is doing. It's because he does love Abby, but once again, it's hard. With Abby, it's not easy. And maybe at one point in time it was easy, but for so long it's been so hard that's why he had an affair, because it was easier. That doesn't make it right, but I'm just saying that's his justification for it, right? And so I think there is a part of him that still loves Abby. He wanted things to work out, but the moment she pushed for divorce, the moment she got Cordelia, like that's when like shit got real for him. And it's like, no, all right. And he came out swinging. Like he came out super vindictive. It's like, oh, I'm doing what's best for the children. And it's like, no, you were being vindictive. And he, at the end of the day, he got caught up in his feels. We as humans are all like that, which isn't excusing. It's still like hashtag fuck Frank, but he drew it back a little bit. He got a little more favor from me this episode when he was talking to her at the end of the episode. He's like, we had more good times than bad times. She's like, we had great times. I mean, we had 2 amazing kids, but it doesn't change. Like, I mean, it's just like, I think that is what it is. Like, Frank just legitimately felt he was hurt and he was lashing out. And he, once again, you can't look at this and be like, oh, like Frank was like being a complete and utter asshole, like the way he was being so vindictive towards Abby. So that's why I was like, man, they made him the most unlikable character this season. Like, I was fine with Frank before. I think I had a decent, because I understood where he was coming from in season 1. But now it's like, this season, I was like, man, you got a lot to win me back. I don't know if the general audience felt like that. Once again, nothing against the actor, because the actor's playing the role and the character the way it was written. And he was meant to be kind of a douchebag. Because, I mean, yes, both parties don't look great in this situation, but like Frank came off more of a douchebag than Abby in this regard. But I think that's also like, that's very true to any situation. A divorce situation could be like, oh, both parents are D-bags, but they both love their children. They just have their complicated issues. And one parent could be more of a douchebag than another. So it's like, I think it's perfectly fine with Frank being written as a douchebag, because I'm sure that's true to life, that you get so caught up in your feelings, especially in a divorce, that you can get very vindictive, especially with like so many emotions, because it's like your family splitting up, the kids want that. And obviously the kids are acting out and lashing out because of it. So there's a lot there. I think it's still kind of an interesting spot for Sophia. Like, Nico's kind of okay with everything. And then Sophia just sat there for a second and she kind of almost like rolled her eyes. So it's just kind of like, oh, okay. I don't know whether it's just like, hey, me and your dad want a moment alone. She's like, oh, fine. Or was it just kind of like, right, you sent Nico off because he was like, oh, I got to get back to this thing. And it was just like, I'm sitting here just like, okay, I guess I'll leave. Like, still, she's a budding teenager. So like, it's like, yeah, I've got to deal with teenagers who are the worst, so. But either way, that's just kind of an interesting place for things to kind of be on that front. And the other side of things is the Lucy, and how that interestingly enough ties in, where Lucy and Maggie are going through what they're going through. Maggie doesn't want Lucy to have anything to do with Harmony, and Lucy's almost like, I can't blame her, but also it's like, and I love that the person she had to go to, she couldn't go to her dad, she couldn't go to Daniel. She actually wanted to talk to Daniel about it too, but he was so caught up in what he was going through that he didn't talk to her about it. Even later on, she's like, I want Abby to represent me. He's like, why won't you let me? She's like, because I tried to talk to you about it, you're so far up your own ass. Plus, Abby's a parent. He's like, but I have Craig. She's like, you need to stop saying that. You really, really need to stop saying that. It's okay that you could treat your dog as a like family, but it's like, don't fully equate that, because you're always going to be on the losing side of that battle. I think even other dog parents will be like, yeah, it's kind of cringe that you keep like legitimately comparing the two. Like, yes, there is overlap in what they need and being taken care of, but it's not exactly the same thing. It's not fully equatable. And the fact is he keeps doing that. And I think that we'll talk about later how that rubs more and more salt into the wound for Daniel. But it is the thing of also, you've never asked me about Maggie. The fact is, because, I mean, let's not forget, like, when Lucy was going through what she went through, who did she turn to, like, in the season 1 finale when everything fell apart with her marriage? Who did she go to? She went to Abby. She didn't go to you. And then, like, Abby's been there, and yeah, they have their complicated relationship, but they've definitely gotten closer over the season. But, like, right, she asked me about things. At no point did Daniel ever ask her about, like, oh, so what's up with Maggie? Is she okay? The bad baby situation? Did he even really know she was in the hospital? Probably did, but it's like he never really, really asked. And so for her, it's like, I need a support system of someone that's got my back. And it feels like lately, bro, you haven't had my back. But either way, they were trying to set it up so that she could get the divorce papers back. Well, the papers that their dad made her sign, which made her give away her legal rights, which we know that's not what Lucy wanted. Lucy wanted to, like, be there and support Maggie in whatever way possible, because that's who Lucy is. But also it's her way of being like, right, I do want to help you out in all of this. I want to play a part in this. But Harry, in his own way, because of his own circumstances, because of the life he's led, he decided, like, no, I'm looking out for you so you don't have anything to do with the baby. And because of that, basically Lucy ended up signing away her rights. And so she wanted to get the divorce the papers back before Maggie could see them, like, no harm, no foul. Well, the problem is her mom was there and made sure that Maggie saw them and even signed them. So, yeah, Lucy has no bearings in all of this now. So it's like, oh, that sucks. So it is a situation of, yeah, I was wondering whether it would go to a court situation, and it does, which complicates things. Once again, very much like the Frank and everything issue. It's like, once again, these siblings are going through very parallel situations, except, like, Abby, it was a fight to get her children back in like a lot of regards, but it's also like a fight for how much time she gets to spend with her kids. Once again, it's still the direct parallel with Lucy, but obviously Maggie's lawyer tried to paint it as like, right, I did not realize they were married that short amount of time. I thought they'd been together for a while. That's so interesting. They only knew each other for like 3 months before they got married, or at least engaged. Maybe that was even just counting even the marriage. And wasn't it like a year into the marriage there was like, oh, a year into the marriage you started cheating. So I was like, oh, like I said, for whatever reason, I thought they were married for a couple years. It's like, no, they've only been married for like probably a little over a year. I was like, interesting. And so it's because it's like, how can we trust someone who's so impulsive? It's like, you weren't really all about the baby situation. In fact, you weren't really there for Maggie during the pregnancy. It's like, yeah, because Maggie asked me not to be. And that was even something that Abby pulled back up of like, right, and when cross-examining Maggie of, yes, Lucy wanted to try and talk to you, but you asked her not to, and you wanted nothing to do with her. And it's like, right, Lucy was only respecting your wishes. So it's not like she didn't want to be there. And that also plays interesting enough into the family dynamic, because obviously Abby learned last season Harry wanted to try and be in her life, but Joanne kind of nipped that in the bud. Because very similarly, she was going through her feelings at the time and she painted Harry in a very negative light. Which, Abby has every right to feel the way, because obviously he wasn't the best. He wasn't there for her, was kind of not really there for Daniel. So it's just interesting how the like cycle of the family situation kind of plays out. Now Lucy's kind of playing out, like that's kind of getting played out a little bit for Lucy and her situation with Maggie. But and that was Abby's point of, right, family is messy. It can be annoying, it can be this, it can be that. But at the end of the day, this baby will always do better with having more love. Like Lucy being their support system. She might not have wanted to be all about the baby, but yes, she's entitled to change her mind. People are allowed to change their mind. That's like someone who's like, oh, I didn't want the baby at first, and then deciding at the end, like, no, I want you. You're entitled to be able to change your mind. But once again, like Maggie has every right to feel the way she does too. So it is a thing of, yeah, she's acting on like, yes, I'm hurt because of what Lucy did. She cheated on me multiple times, and yes, she didn't want anything with this pregnancy. And it's like Lucy didn't bring a lot of that up. Maggie kind of had to suss that out for herself. Like, oh, and she also felt it. She felt it out because it's like, right, anytime a baby conversation came up, like Maggie was really pushing it. Lucy was always kind of like, she was so flippant about it. And that's what they were trying to goose against her, that, oh, who's to say she won't lose interest and be so flippant about it before? But it's like, right, give people an opportunity to change. And Lucy has shown that she wants to be about this. She wants to be there for the child. Let her be there and like love the child. And that becomes a thing of like, right, Lucy gets to have her name on her birth certificate. Maggie's still the primary, especially while the baby's still an infant. But their daughter, like Lucy, gets to spend 2 hours with her, and I thought that was really nice. We do have the situation at the end of the episode where Lucy goes to see Maggie and she's moved out. Understandable, because it's like, regardless of how the court feels, I don't think that's a thing of her running away. I think she's probably moving on and moving out, because regardless of it all, that's a place that's bound to, like, because it's also like, right, you can kind of come in whenever you want to because you got a key to the place. This is still your place. And I think Maggie wants to probably, you can interact with Harmony, but I'm going to limit it as much connection that we have to each other in the regards of, I'm not going to stay in a place that you're still paying the bills for. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm gonna get my own place, maybe even stay with someone for a little while, have a support system outside of you. Your relationship can be with Harmony as her mother, but you and I, we're like, you're practically dead to me type of situation. I'm only doing this because it's court appointed, but I mean, it's understandable. So I'm assuming Lucy's going to be moving out of JoJo's place, and they haven't really brought it up, but I'm sure she's still staying there. I mean, I don't see anywhere else she's probably staying in the time frame. But I'm assuming like that means Lucy's going to move back into her place. I mean, so not unless she kind of has a feeling of, I don't want to move back. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think it's Maggie doing a runner. I think it is simply like, hey, I don't want anything to do with a place that you're paying for anymore. Once again, she's entitled to feel the way she felt. She's the one that would like, Lucy's the one that broke her vow. She's the one that cheated. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out going forward. How, once again, family is messy and complicated. So, and continuing that aspect, we have, I mean, especially with all the siblings, especially against their dad, because Abigail's defense for Lucy in the court was basically saying like she got terrible advice from Harry, but Harry was against that because he's like, no, it's going to ruin my reputation. It's like, put your reputation aside. This is a sound strategy necessary to protect your daughter, which eventually he gave in, and Abby was like, of course you would. And he's like, what's that supposed to mean? It's like, Lucy's your favorite, which he's like, I don't have a favorite. She's like, you would bend over backwards for Lucy. You're willing to tarnish your own reputation for Lucy. You would never do that for me or Daniel, but for him, it's like, what are you talking about? I hate that you guys are constantly trying to make it seem like I don't do right by you. He's like, I put my reputation on the line, Abby. No one would take you after your whole debacle like over a year ago. If it wasn't for me, no one would have taken you, and I'm the only reason why, like, I'm the reason that I helped you. I sacrificed a lot. He's like, I got ridiculed and asked, like, am I serious? Why would I take you on? By colleagues, even my family, which I'm assuming, when we know Daniel and Lucy weren't too receptive of Abby in the beginning. So it's interesting. When he said family, I can only assume that's what he meant. Not unless he means like extended family, but I can only assume he's talking about Lucy and Daniel in that regard. Once again, they weren't the biggest fans of Abby, especially at the beginning of the series. A lot of season 1, but definitely the most at the beginning. So, but it's like, don't question like all that I've given up, that I've staked on the line for you. Because the sad thing is, because Abby's got her issues, because it's like, yeah, you weren't there in my life, and sadly that did lead to a lot of that has played a role in a lot of the complicated issues that Abby has. And for her, that's what she never wanted, that history to be repeated with her and Frank when it comes to her own children, but sadly it kind of did. I don't think it was probably just as nasty and messy, but the end result's better. We'll talk about that ending when we get to it, but it's also a situation because Harry offered her a job, because I knew Harry would want her to stay, but he can't admit, it's not just on a professional level. He's trying to be like, hey, I'm trying to be logical about it. She's really good. She thinks outside the box. The case that she got for us, that civil suit from season 1 with Nina's dad and all those other people, that doctor who popped up this season, because of that, they made a lot of money. She brought a lot of money to this firm. But it's not just that. He can't admit that on a personal level, he likes having her around, despite their back and forth, the tit for tat. It's like he enjoys having her around because it allowed him to finally have a relationship with his daughter that he hasn't had in like over 30 years. So there's that. Which is also, obviously he has a very complicated relationship with Daniel too, because Daniel just keeps feeling like nothing I do is good enough. It's funny because Abby looks at Lucy as the favorite. Daniel looks at Abby as the favorite, because it's like he recognizes that their dad kind of does a lot. It's like, wait, you offered Abby a job here. You didn't consult me about it. All you've been doing lately is complaining about everything I've done wrong and saying that what I'm doing is not good enough. But even then, Daniel just stood up for himself. It's like, you are going to respect me. Show me some respect. I am a partner in all of this. Like, Abby is going to be leaving, and I know that kind of bothers you, but I've been here putting in my time and proving myself, and yet you're not going to discredit the good work that I do, that the good lawyer that I am. And even it struck a chord because he got that conversation after he had his conversation with Abby. So, and he even sits down with Jerry of like, man, no matter my kids, all their resentment from me runs so deep. They're like, oh, like I've done nothing for them. I've sacrificed so much more for my kids than they will ever realize. And they're just so grateful and whiny. And then you have Jerry being like, yeah, welcome to parenthood, Harry. It's like, yeah, that's the downside of being a parent is about sacrifice. So they're not always going to recognize it. And it's a thankless job a lot of times. And yes, they're entitled to their feelings about you not really being there in a lot of capacities. And Harry has to take that on the chin, and he kind of has, but it boils up to a point where he just like, oh, I'm not that bad of a parent. It's like, but there's been plenty of room for improvement even now, and all these years later, you could do a lot better. But it's like, yeah, like, I love that when Lucy, brought this up to Abby, like, her and Daniel were both going blow to blow against Harry about, like, you gave her terrible advice. You're not really the best person. Like, Lonsky and Abby saw them as a team of like, yo, me and Daniel are representations of you not being, you can't really give parenting advice when you weren't really much of a parent to us. And Daniel kind of agreed, like, oh, boo-hoo, woe is you. All the hand cramps you had you got from all those child support and spousal support shit you had to write. Oh, boo-hoo you. So. But I think that's interesting with the Daniel of it all too, because he has a lot of animosity towards Abby, because Abby ends up sticking around, and she's like, whoa, no sarcastic, like, thanks. But he's like, you could have gone back to your old job or whatever, but you chose to stay, because for him, he's not as happy to have Abby around. Jerry is, so is Harry, because she ultimately does take the job. Her mom had told her, like, right, you don't have to take your old job, because now, having worked in family law, she kind of recognizes, like, she sticks up for people. And it's like, right, going back to injury law of like, oh, this guy is suing the woman that saved his life because she gave him CPR and cracked one of his ribs. Now he wants to sue her. It's like, do I really want to be a part of that? It's like, it's that lawyer thing of like, man, like, because as a lawyer, especially depending on the firm you work for, like, you have to pick and choose. But, when you get to pick and choose your clients, but especially if you work for a firm, it's like, they make a lot of decisions of who they'll pick and who they'll get to take the job. You can't really say no to certain things. So there's stipulations with a job like that. So it's like, you got to represent people you don't agree with. It's just everyone, under the eyes of law, everyone deserves representation. Whether you like them or not, you have to give them the best defense possible. That is part of your oath of being a lawyer. Like, it's how the system works, because once again, it's supposed to be for everyone. If it doesn't work for everyone, it works for no one. So good people stuck in the middle, and even the most god awful shitty people still have to be represented, even though, you know, it's part of the legal system. At least, you know, I'm basing that on I don't know Canada's legal system. I'd assume the same thing's applicable, but I'm also coming at it from a very United States of America perspective on the law. You know, once again, it's supposed to be like that. Not always is the case, but moving aside, like I said, I understand where Daniel's coming from, because he has a lot of animosity towards Abby, because it's like his star ends up doling so much around her, and it's also because it's like, right, they're tit for tat. It's kind of like, oh, it's a brother sister thing, but it's also like it grades on him a little bit, just like Harry feeling like, oh, you guys constantly calling me the bad parent grades on him, and it's just. I mean, even though Abby has done a lot to help Daniel out, like, they do make a good team despite their dysfunction. And I think just for him, it's just a reminder of, like, the more you're around here, the less I'll shine. I'm the one that's actually a partner. But Harry did tell Abby she's the future of this firm. She could be if she decided to stay. And that really put a smile on her face, because it's the opposite of season 1's finale, where she felt like she didn't belong. Because it's like, hey, here's a... I don't think it wasn't the season 1 finale. I think it was like maybe the second or third last episode of this season, where they took the photo for the firm and everything, and Abby wasn't included. She was, excluded from that. So it's kind of like she didn't feel like she belonged, and now she feels like she does, but kind of puts Daniel in an awkward place. To be fair, he's going through what he's going through. I could go back and cut this out from the previous episode, but I'm going to keep it in. I called Martina Michaela, because it's such a big gap between these episodes, because I ended up watching like episode 9, like it's like I recorded it like a day or two ago, and it had been like at that time it had been like a week. I just blanked on Martina's name. For whatever reason I said Michaela, but yeah, so I'm keeping it in a recording. I've already edited it, so I don't think I cut that out anyway, but either way, because I'm sure I called her Michaela multiple times, but Martina, like, he's going through the awkward thing with Martina, and he doesn't know how to handle it, so he ends up, confronting her at the end of the episode, like, hey, like, he's trying to apologize to her. He doesn't want to ruin their friendship. I know you have a boyfriend, which I was like, yeah, I thought so, because I remember she mentioned it once, but she never mentioned, like, hey, we broke up. So he goes over to apologize, and then she kisses him. I'm like, yeah, get it. I was like, okay, because it's super obvious you two, like, work well together. I even love his friend is like, yo, like, obviously there's some new lady in your life, because he's like, when you're single, you hang out with me more, but when there's some new lady in your life, you tend to hang around me less. He's like, dude, no, it's not like, he's like, go ahead, look me in the eyes and tell me it's not someone you want to sleep with. He's like, it's not like that. It's like, yeah, no eye contact when you saying that, bro. And it's like, come on, like, let me meet her. And it's like, eventually they probably will, but he's also like, I'm not going to let her meet my bro-ish dude. It's like, yeah, I don't want to scare her off, and especially where they were at that time, where it's like they hadn't really talked since the kiss. So that's going to be interesting to see, like, both worlds collide potentially in the future for Daniel in that capacity. So that's going to be interesting. Another angle to this episode is the whole Cecil of it all. He is officially a paralegal. He got a car. Felt so bad because Cecil got the 1-2 punch of, like, right, they got him cut back on cost and stuff at the firm because they're not making as much money. Because the reason why they made more money the previous year is because Abby brought in that civil suit situation. So that ended up giving the firm like a crap ton of, like, money. So they weren't bringing as much now. So Daniel was suggesting, hey, let's downsize. And Harry's like, no, he wants to keep this office because the office is a representation of, like, when he first bought this place. And for him, it's a representation of, it shows strength. If we move, it shows weakness of, like, oh, this firm is on its back leg if they had to relocate to a smaller office. It's like, it's meant to, it's all about representation and just how you present yourself to the world, and in particular how they represent themselves in the world of law. And it's like, because if clients hear that, they might bail out of, like, oh, like, maybe this firm isn't as good as it used to be. And the same thing's applicable, it's a show of strength, essentially, like that. We're not on our back foot. We haven't had to, like, backpedal. We're still just as strong pushing forward. That's kind of the whole mentality. So at the end of the day, Harry's like, yo, if you want to be a part of the hiring process, Daniel, gotta be part of the firing process. So Daniel now has to do the ugly side of business. So, like, yeah, you have to fire people. So he's suggesting some people, but Jerry's like, no, you can't fire her, talking about, oh, she takes a lot of sick days. She has a child with disabilities, hence why she takes a lot of sick days. so and so. It's like, oh, that person's older, they're about out the door. It's like, yes, that person's 2 years away from retirement. That's not going to look great when we do that. What about Winston? Well, then you'd have to go looking for another another person, receptionist, to kind of work the front desk. So, well, Cecil, it's like, right, Jerry's like, right, as they say, last one in the door, first one out. I was like, oh, that sucks, especially because Cecil's on top of the world, got a new car, feeling great about being a paralegal. And he was like telling Daniel, like, thanks for this opportunity. And then I was like, Daniel's not going to do it. But he was like, I got to let you go. He's like, let me go where? And so he goes out. Winston's helping him, had to carry his stuff out, and his car got taken. I thought because he couldn't lock his car, I was like, oh, someone stole it. It's like, no, his car got towed because he was in a parking spot that you could only be there for 2 hours. He wasn't paying attention. I would assume that's his first car or whatever, so he was just so excited he wasn't paying attention to the signs like he should have. But ultimately, they do get Cecile back. Cecil, because I'm thinking about that's what Harry said of like, oh, let's get Cecile back. We can hire him. It's like, still haven't gotten his name right. And I'm curious, will Cecil ever correct him? Probably not. Because he probably doesn't want to rock the boat. But he's so happy to be back. And I love Winston. Winston being the dude. Winston being the bro. I love that friendship of where that kind of started off animosity-wise, where Cecil had taken on the credit. But they found their way back to each other. And now it's like, it's like, oh, you want to hire me back? And then I love that, Winston's there in the window being like, negotiate. It's like, and then, asks for, and then he like raises up his hands. He's like, I want a parking space. And then he writes raise. And he's like, I want a raise. He's like, we could give you the parking spot. He's like, deal. And Winston's just like, yeah, Cecil. But Cecil loves this job and he loves being a part of all of this. So he's willing to take whatever. So I thought that was so beautiful and cute. So I thought that was just kind of neat. I love how this season ended up beautifully rounding up, and closing off. And I just thought it was kind of a dope way to wrap up the season. Oh, but can't forget our stinger at the end where Abby walks in and I was like, oh, she's going to walk in on a Joanne with somebody. And she does. I was like, the moment I was like, I don't even need to see, it's Harry. And lo and behold, I guess because she's gotten this, I guess it's like they haven't really been around each other in such a long time, and her dating life hasn't really worked out. His dating life hasn't really worked out. And I think it's just they're kind of seeing each other in a different light where it's like, oh, you're there for Lucy, Joanne. I really appreciate you kind of being the parent in the particular room, in court, because Joanne was there during the Lucy thing I brought up earlier, but forgot to talk about, where it's just like, oh, she was like cheering on and kind of her stepping in like objection. Just doing her thing in court, and just instead of leaving it to Abby and getting so excited. It's really adorable. But yeah, them shocking up again. I mean, it happens from time to time where exes just, enough time apart, eventually you circle back to each other. So it's like, that's interesting. I don't think that's reflective of that. I don't think that's necessarily going to be Maggie or Lucy. And I also don't think it's going to be Frank or Abby. I think they're going to be content in their respective situations. Once again, still don't know where things stand with the whole, God, I'm blanking on firefighter dude's name. Aiden. I was about to say he was in the last episode. I was blanking on it. But yeah, still don't know where that stands. Once again, I don't know if that was something that was handled a little for one scene last episode and we just didn't see it, or we just don't know where things currently stand on that. So I was already aware that the show had already gotten renewed for a third season. In fact, the third season was already airing, but I don't know what that situation looks like, because if you look it up online, it's unclear about, because I was reading some articles just now saying okay, it's already started airing in Canada. It hasn't started airing here in the US, obviously, because this network hasn't kind of greenlit that, but that's why I'm unsure about okay, so what's the situation airing in Canada, because I guess it hasn't already aired in Canada. I'm unsure what this show's airing situation is currently. I'm like I said, it says that it's aired already, or at least some of those articles were saying it was currently airing in Australia. Maybe currently Australia's airing it because they have the licensing rights for season 3, and we just haven't gotten them yet here in the US. But I don't even know where it stands even in Canada, because if you look up the list of episodes, it's just I see one and then nothing else. And based on looking on IMDb, it looks like, and the way it's almost set up, because the rest of the first half of the season has ratings and stuff, so it feels like only half the season. That's where I kind of felt like only some of the season is aired. I don't know what that situation is. I don't know what that is. It just seems, it's such a weird situation. I'm like, I don't know what that necessarily means for us here in the US. Like, I'm like, did not all the season finish filming, or is it just a licensing right of like it hasn't distributed and fully aired? Like, has it all aired in Canada? Like I said, it's currently airing, based on some articles, still currently airing in Australia. So it's I don't know what that is. Maybe because obviously I'm here in the US, like everything is allocated to, hey, this is what the situation in the US, and maybe that's why my results are like my search results are the way they are. Either way, I also hope, I haven't seen anything saying that this is the final season. I hope that's not the case. I'd love the show to go on for as long as possible, 4 or 5 seasons, whatever. If they're being able to end the show on the terms that they want to, not just being like you're getting canceled type of thing. So I hope like this upcoming, the 3rd season is there in whatever capacity. I'm excited when we're ultimately able to get it here in the US, but I'm also hopeful that we get more than a season 3. I do hope we get at least 5 seasons. I mean, if they want to run longer, I'm behind that as well. But because I really like this show and I like these characters, and I'm so excited to, continue seeing where things take everyone going forward in season 3. What new challenges await everyone with these new, changing, and complicated and extremely messy family dynamics. Because we can all relate to messy family situations. I feel like most people can. I'm sure there are a lot of people that are who have perfectly fine family, but I feel like most people probably have some dysfunctional family in some shape or form or some capacity. But anyway, that's really all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.